Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Now in this video we are going to be talking about Indonesia, and no, before you click off, I am not another Australian who went to Bali. We are going to be talking about Sumatra. Now this is part of our Southeast Asia series, and if you didn't see last week's video, that was on Malaysia, and you can see that video here, or I'll link it in the description below and you can go and check that one out too. So without anything further, let's get into it and talk about all things Sumatra. So first up, I wanted to talk about the route that we took while we were in Sumatra. Sumatra was the only island that we saw out of Indonesia, and that was because of convenience. The ferry leaves directly from Malacca and takes you straight to the east coast of Sumatra, and we were able to cut across to the west, do a loop, and then basically go the same way out that we came in. It was the cheapest, and given our time restrictions in terms of how far we can travel with a bicycle and the visa restrictions, we did about 3 weeks in total and just saw a few limited places. So we landed in Dumai. We headed towards Pekanbaru, but we didn't actually head into the city. It's super large, and at this point we are still camping, so we didn't want to spend a lot of money on accommodation. We used some back roads to get to Bangkinang, and then we went to Bukittinggi. From Bukittinggi, we headed down into the valley to Lake Maninjau. We followed the coast south and then came back up between the two volcanoes, back to Bangkinang to stay with a family that we had made friends with there. And then from Bangkinang, we actually caught a bus back out to Dumai to catch the ferry back across. The landscape throughout Riau is it's hot, humid, palm oil plantations the whole time. It was a really intense, and there's only big main highways to cycle on, and it wasn't super safe cycling, and by that point we were over it. The landscape in West Sumatra is really intense in terms of hills, and we were exhausted by the time we had finished up in Sumatra. So we ended up catching a bus back out from Bangkinang back to Dumai, so we could then head back to Malacca and finish up working for another 2 weeks there in the hostel. Indonesia on a whole is a really intense country. We had people following us for kilometers and kilometers on their scooters, trying to get photos with us, trying to stop us and make conversations, people yelling out things to you constantly all the time, attention 100% all the time. It was always on, and that sometimes worked in our favor and gave us a lot of places to sleep and a lot of families that we met, but it was also super exhausting to constantly be talking to people when we were, the humidity was really high. You're not sleeping amazingly well in a tent at nighttime in a palm oil plantation, and I think that our attention spans and tolerance for certain things became really low at this point. We were exhausted physically and mentally, and then added on top of that the extreme weather conditions, and then added on top of that the extreme personalities from the Indonesian people. The two places that I absolutely fell in love with while we were in Sumatra was Lake Maninjau and Harau Valley. They were our two absolute favorite places. They were quiet, there wasn't any tourists, we were able to stay in beautiful places, and they completely took our breath away. We had just finished cycling over valleys and mountains, literal mountains, for about 7 days by the time we got to Lake Maninjau, and we headed down through all of the 44 hairpin turns, and you come out on this beautiful volcanic lake, and we were able to organise a place to stay for $4 a night, and we ended up staying there for about 3 or 4 nights, I think, in total. And there was no one else staying at the hotel where we were. We were able to chat with the owner a lot and find delicious food and chat with a lot of the locals. We had obviously gone there in the off-peak season, and I think that contributed to how cheap it was and also how empty it was. I can imagine that in the high travel season that place can be quite busy, but in saying that, I think Sumatra on a whole is a very untouristy location if you're looking for those sort of hidden places in Asia. Lake Maninjau felt so peaceful. We had a private room for that $4, and every night you could hear the call to prayer like drift over the top of the lake, and everyone would be heading towards the mosque, and it was just such a beautiful and humbling way to finish off the day as the sun was setting over the mountains in the distance. And when I think about it, it takes me straight back there, like reading all my emails and my blog posts, and I'll leave the link in the description below. All those, it makes me so nostalgic to think back on all the memories and all the people that we met and all the food that we ate and all of those things. And Lake Maninjau was certainly one of those places where we could stop and really soak in the Sumatran culture. Our second place we actually kind of stumbled across by accident. We hadn't originally planned to go there, and as you're cycling away from Bukittinggi, it's sort of off the normal path, and you go in and it was all cliffs on either side, limestone cliffs, and then it opens out into rice paddies and this really intense green. And we had found a beautiful place to camp by this river, and we ended up chatting to another guy who was building a wooden house on the other side of the river, and he offered us tea and some food, and he said, "Where are you guys staying tonight?" We said, "Oh, we're actually just going to camp next to the river." And he was like, "No, don't be silly, come and stay with my family." So we actually did kind of like a homestay by accident. They cooked us dinner every single night, and they took us around their farm and showed us. They took us to a locals only hidden waterfall up in the mountains, and it was such a beautiful experience to be taken in by this family. They actually looked after a young boy who was a mute, but they were teaching him to play the flute. So every night we would sit around and eat food as a family, and then after dinner we would all listen to the family play the flute. Their house was built on stilts over a small waterway, so the kids used to come along and just fish straight off the balcony. The balcony was where we were sleeping as well, but that was like one of the most humbling times that we had while we were in Sumatra. It was completely shut off from that busyness and intenseness that comes along with going to Indonesia, but it was so special, and I love that place. And if I ever headed back to Sumatra, I would 100% just spend my whole 3 weeks there if I could. I will also mention places that we didn't like. So while we were staying at Lake Maninjau, we decided to take a break from the bikes and actually use one of the communal taxis to get down to Padang. We heard that it was really nice beaches and beautiful place to go, and maybe we could use some of our saved money to jump across and have like a bit of an island day and then head back towards Lake Maninjau. We got to Padang and it was the worst place we went to. All of the hostels were overpriced, dirty, filthy. I did not like the place at all. It was super touristy. And after coming out of a place like Lake Maninjau, where it was very peaceful and very quiet, and the village that is there was super accepting, and then to go to Padang, which was also a touristy place, but feel like people were trying to get money from you all the time and sell you things all the time, and the food wasn't really that good. I don't know, it was just an overrated place that was disgusting. The place that we stayed in, I swear to God, I was like, we're gonna get bed bugs. Like, neither of us wanted to sleep in the bed. There was like cockroach poo everywhere. The bathroom stunk. I don't know if that was just the place that we stayed, but I don't remember having a very nice vibe about the village at all. Now, the camping that we were able to do in Sumatra was actually kind of limited. When we were in Riau, the first state on the eastern side, it was all palm oil plantations, and they were everywhere, so we never had an issue finding anywhere to sleep, but they are so humid and stifling, and the tent would be like a sauna, and as you're laying there in the middle of the night, you could see the shadow of mosquitoes like trying to find a hole to get in to have a nighttime feed. They were so massive, like you could hear them like tapping on the outside of the tent trying to get in. And It was super, super uncomfortable. We had spent maybe like 3 or 4 days in Riau just sleeping in palm oil plantations. And as you go further into Indonesia, into Sumatra, you can feel the hills starting to get steeper and longer and more intense. And as that came, so did the landscape. It changed as well. You could have these really intense jungles and the land wasn't flat anymore. So it was really difficult to try and find places. We stayed a couple of times in a hotel. Obviously, when we went to Lake Maninjau, we stayed at a place. We tried to find a place in Bangkanang, and then we ended up actually being taken in by a family, and we stayed with them both times that we came through Bangkanang on our loop. A beautiful family, and we still talk to them now, still follow them on Facebook and update them all the time. We also, every time that we did find somewhere to camp, people would approach us and be like, no, and, you know, find places for us, put us up with their families, and, you know, we would all be sleeping in a row with the kids, you know, wrapped up underneath the blankets. So we had some really beautiful times sharing homes and things like that while we were in Sumatra. But again, camping was difficult in the West Sumatra state and easier in Riau because of the availability. But again, sauna, absolute sauna in the tent, like not normal. One time we even had to pretend that we were married so that we could stay in a hotel. So Sumatra is a really heavy Muslim community, and I know that every island has its different majority throughout Indonesia. Sumatra is majority Muslim, and in order to discourage young couples from heading to a hotel to have quick flings before they're married, they have a rule that you have to be married to stay in a hotel, and that obviously carried over if you were a foreigner as well. So every time we went to stay somewhere in a hotel, and I say every time, but like the 2 times, we had to pretend that we were a married couple. And I remember cycling this one time and we'd gone uphill the whole time. We couldn't find anywhere. The ground was really, really steep. The jungle was really, really thick, and we couldn't find anywhere to camp. So we thought, okay, we're just going to have to bite the bullet and stay somewhere. And we ended up going in, and I remember covering my head and my shoulders just to be respectful for the culture. And yeah, we had to pretend that we were married so that we could actually sleep a night in the hotel. Now, the food in Sumatra was, again, intense. Like its people, one mouthful would, you know, punch you in the face with chili. And I remember coming across from Malaysia on the ferry, and we landed in Dubai, and we thought, okay, let's grab some lunch before we cycle out and find somewhere to camp. And we stopped by this tiny little food place on the side of the road, and there wasn't much selection. You basically just point to the things that you want and they load up your plate, sit down and eat it. My face literally melted off. Like, I couldn't talk. And we had already built up, I had at the time quite a high chili tolerance, but Sumatra was like another level. This was basically just like meat and chili paste and rice, and all I could eat was the rice, and it was so hot. But as we ate more, and when you have no choice, you just do what you've got to do, especially when you're cycling and you need the energy and you need the food, you just eat it. And we did get used to the chili, and the food is delicious. We used to have this long soup, which was kind of like a peanutty soup with like rice wafers and noodles and like prawn crackery things in it. And that's what we would have for breakfast, along with a kopi. Kopi susu was like the one that had milk in it, and kopi pihat was like black with sugar, and there was sugar in everything, so much sugar, but delicious. So we would start our day off with like a noodle soup and a coffee, and we would be like ready to go, ready to tackle the endless amount of uphill climbs that there seemed to be while we were cycling in Sumatra. For lunch, we usually used to eat a nasi goreng. So we would get like a big oily fried egg on top of some noodles or rice. And again, that was just covered in salt and spices and chili sauce and on all of the good things, and then that would power us on into the evening. There also seemed to be weddings going on all the time, and when we were staying with the family in Bangkinang, we ended up being invited to one of their family's weddings and we went as guests, and all the curries lined up. Oh, they were so delicious. And I know that Sumatra is known for having an amazing beef rendang, and it is so good. And when we were staying with the family, Fifi, our host, she actually taught me how to make it, and we went to the market and we gathered all the ingredients and took them home and cooked a beef rendang, which basically takes, you know, a couple of days to let the sauce simmer and let the meat really become tender. And it was amazing. I don't know how I will ever remember the ingredients or how to make it, but it was super accomplishing to make something that I'd never made before, and to do it with a family. It felt really nice. So while we were in Sumatra, we did not work for any of our accommodation. We used a couple of different websites to research cheap places before we went somewhere, and that was how we were able to find our place in Lake Maninjau for $4 a night. And that was a private room, sort of sitting up. We had our own little balcony looking over the lake, and that was an amazing place. Again, we did go there off peak, and that's probably why it was so cheap. And the other times we would just cycle around to different hotels in the area and ask for a price comparison. And sometimes we were able to haggle and change the price if it was just going to be for one night, just to get us through to the next day. So we didn't work for our accommodation while we were in Indonesia. We didn't have the time to do it, and we wanted to just use the time as a quick sort of loop and then head back towards Malacca, because we still had accommodation for work organised in the other country. Now, the visa situation was a 30-day visa on arrival, and we were able to just organise this. We took our passports when we caught the ferry across, and when you land on the other side, you go through like a sort of immigration section. The guy was hilarious. He pulled us out and was like, "You guys are on bikes," and wanted to take photos with us, and that should have been a telltale sign about what was going to happen the rest of the time we were in Indonesia. But it was very lax. It was a stamp on the way in, and when we headed back to Malaysia, we got another 30 days on arrival, which I mentioned in the last video. Now, I feel like if I had to summarize Indonesia in a giant nutshell, because I don't think it would fit into a normal size one, I would think of loud, intense, lots of weddings, lots of mosques, but friendly people and delicious food. I swear to God, there was a mosque being built every 10 kilometers, and they always have like these great big speakers that are like the size of cars, just blasting out music. And then they have people on the road obviously asking for donations to help fund the building of the mosque. But you would see them every 10 kilometers. I don't understand how they needed so many mosques, for one, but while we were camping, being able to hear the call to prayer every morning, and that would be like if it's time to get up, and then finishing the day with it, I will say was one of my favorite things about being in Malaysia, but also Indonesia, and having that sort of start of the day and end of the day, and that beautiful song to wake up to and go to sleep to. So that was my summary of Sumatra, Indonesia, and what we got up to while we were there. Next week, I will be talking about Thailand and all of the things that we got up to while we were there. So if you liked this video or you learned something new, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can see our entire Southeast Asia series. Now, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next week.